For most of my life, I have lived and worked in a town and never experienced or thought about country life. But now I am lucky enough to live in a pretty little village here in France and enjoy a very relaxed lifestyle. I can also really appreciate just how beautiful that nature and the countryside are. From the wild poppies to the fields of lavender, nature provides an array of colour. I can also appreciate just how hard the farmers work. Many hours are spent working in their fields, often late into the night. In the past, we have tried growing things like tomatoes in our small garden, often without success. So for me, to see things like these tomatoes grown on such a large scale is mind-blowing. The crops do require a lot of watering, but there are many small canals around here, fed from the River Isère, that the farmers pump water from. What I also find fascinating is how the crops the farmers grow change depending on which direction we drive from our house. In our area, it seems to be mainly cereal crops. It's wonderful to see the fields change colour from green as the crops grow to the vast swathes of gold. Once the crops have been cut, it's also fascinating to watch the modern machinery collect everything and leave large bales ready for collection. As the cereal crops are collected, the sweet corn we saw planted a couple of months previously are reaching maturity, which takes between 60 to 100 days depending on the variety. The plants are very tall, about 2 meters, but each one normally only produces 2 cobs. Again, it is the vast areas covered by these plants that I find hard to get used to. The lavender provides spectacular colour as well as its very recognisable perfume, and the tomatoes are turning red, ready for picking. Development of the sunflower crop started in France at the end of the 70s. Its cultivation was promoted in order to produce domestic and edible oil, which could substitute butter for cooking amid health concerns, and groundnut seeds and oil imported from Africa. But from just outside of our village, on the road to Grenoble, the fields are mainly orchards of walnuts. Coming originally from the east, the walnut was introduced into Europe by the Romans. In the 11th century, the walnut provided domestic oil for food and lighting. It was also used to make nut wines, cakes, including the famous walnut cake, and bread, and in the preparation of medicines and also dye production. Grenoble walnuts are famed for their taste as well as their medicinal value, as they are rich in beneficial fatty acids. The Grenoble walnut is actually so well regarded that in 1938 it became the first fruit to receive an AOC, which is the French equivalent to the EU Protected Designation of Origin. 40,000 tonnes of walnuts are harvested each year, with 60% going for export all over the world. This quality label comes with strict cultivation rules, from planting very young trees to the actual harvest. The planting between each tree must be equal to at least 8 meters, and they have to be pruned every 3 years. Irrigation is allowed in dry periods near the roots, which grow horizontally. Walnut trees are amongst the last to start to grow their leaves. They depend on wind to reproduce because their flowers do not attract any insects. The beginning of the harvest each year is fixed by order of the prefecture, and trees can only be harvested for the first time once they reach 8 years old. When it is harvest time, the end of September to the beginning of October, machinery is used to carefully shake the trees without damaging the root structure, which allows the walnuts to drop. The walnuts are quickly collected and loaded into a large trailer, which will take them back to the farm for processing. The machinery at the farm separates the walnuts from sticks and other debris that was collected, as well as removing the outer shell. The walnuts then go through a washing process before being hand salted to remove any unwanted walnuts and debris like stones before being dried. In this farm, the walnuts are dried by vast amounts of warm air, but in the past they were laid out to dry in a séchoir, something smaller farms still use. A séchoir is basically a building for drying walnuts, and there are many scattered around the area. Grenoble walnuts, which boast the AOC quality label, are always sold in their shells, so they are hand sorted to make sure that only walnuts which reach the high standards required are sold. But there is no waste. The local retired residents sit around a large table with a few glasses of wine, removing the shells from the nuts that didn't make the grade, so that the nuts can be made into oil or wine. Apparently they have a cracking time. The road to Grenoble is littered with places to buy walnuts and related products directly from the local producers. These would include the walnuts themselves, nut liqueur, nut wine, choo-choo nuts, nut oil, and even walnut beer. However, if we drive a short distance towards the west, it is fruit growing that takes the centre stage. From the spring to the autumn, the orchards treat us with cherries, peaches and apricots, which leave a wonderful aroma in the air. But even before tasting the fruits, your eyes can enjoy the beautiful colours of the countryside. The locals are fortunate enough to be able to purchase these fruits directly from the grower when in season. But of course, being France, it is the grapevines that appear everywhere, grown in even the most awkward areas. Apparently, the grapes grown on the steep slopes makes the best and therefore most expensive wine. It must certainly be a nightmare to work on these difficult slopes. This is part of the Rhone Valley, which is considered a benchmark for Syrah and Grenache wines. The Rhone Valley is a key wine-producing region in the southeast of France. It follows the north-south course of the Rhone River for almost 150 miles, from Vienne, just south of Lyon, to the Rhone Delta, near the Mediterranean coast. Surprisingly, the origin of Rhone wine is not very French. It's actually the ancient Greeks of pre-Roman France who we have to thank for introducing vineyards into this part of modern-day France. In fact, the Rhone Valley, as well as the Rhone River, received their names from the Greeks. Rhodians, from the Greek island of Rhodes, named the river Rhodanus after themselves, and this became the base for the modern name. While the ancient Greeks introduced the first grapes, it was the ancient Romans who refined the plants, wine production and storing. Much of this Roman influence of Rhone wine began in the 1st century AD. The Romans built villas and wineries, and they also refined their process for storing wine in earthenware vessels called amphorae. These vessels were used for storing and transporting wine and oil, are an excellent way for archaeologists and wine historians to study the long history of wine here. It's proof that the vineyards in the Rhone Valley are some of the oldest on the planet. The Rhone Valley as a whole is the second largest appellation in France, with only Bordeaux having more vineyards. In fact, there are more than 71,000 hectares of vines planted in the Rhone Valley today, which produce more than 400 million bottles of wine a year. However, we are here in the northern Rhone, which starts about 30 kilometres below Lyon in Ampuy and stretches for about 75 kilometres ending in Valence. In comparison with the southern Rhone, the northern Rhone is quite small at just under 3,000 hectares and produces just 5% of all that wine. The northern Rhone is characterised by a continental climate with harsh winters but warm summers. Its climate is influenced by the Mistral wind, which brings colder air from the Massif Central. Syrah is the only red grape allowed to be planted in this region, and the vineyards on the spectacular hill of Tain-de-la-Marge are world famous for their emboldened Syrah wines. The hill is a sun trap, and its essentially 3 south-facing slopes has some of the most famous vineyards names in the region. The vineyards of Hermitage Hill have been planted since the times of ancient Greece in 500 BC. The popular story of Hermitage, though, is of a 13th century crusader who was wounded and sought refuge on the hill. He built a chapel and lived out his life in complete solitude. Thus the hill was named Hermit's Hill or Hermitage. Today there is a tiny reconstructed chapel on Hermitage called St. Christopher that sits alone towards the crest of the hill and looks over the village below. Granite soils and steep narrow hillsides characterise this region, forcing vineyards to make do with limited space. As a result, viticulture is carried out on terraces with low walls that keep the earth in place, called chalets. Apparently, the wines from the north are fresher due to the naturally higher levels of acidity from the Syrah grape and cooler climate. they age extremely well and need around 5 to 10 years before opening them. In their best years, they are powerful yet refined, with depth, concentration and complexity. They offer some of the most compelling and complex wine tasting experiences on the planet. Things don't always go to plan for the farmers though. Returning the following day after filming this shot, a localised storm has passed through some of the fields, causing utter destruction. Due to the small amount of wine produced in the Northern Rhone, prices can be high and the wines can be difficult to find. Needless to say, this is a wine lover's paradise. I am far from being a wine connoisseur, but I can enjoy a nice glass of wine, especially sitting by the river in the summer.